and it's 1:32. Call the meeting to order. And will you please conduct the roll call?
I sure will. Director Brown? Chair Brown?
Here.
Director Crane? I see him. Director Robertson? Here. Director Todd? Director White?
Here.
Does anybody have Ken's cell? Maybe we just need to call him. Because maybe he doesn't get his emails in on his cell.
Maybe. I'll try to
So is Director Brown with us?
She is not. We have Director Todd and Director Brown absent, and then I'll try to, oh wait, I see Ken. This might be Director Todd.
Okay. Well.
Here.
So who's here now?
That was Ken.
Okay. Should I go forward? Because I'm going to need your attention.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to go forward on the agenda. And Director Robinson, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Wherever we're supposed to look, I pledge allegiance to the flag. Well done.
Flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Excellent, sir. Thank you. So
It'll be better if I just sing it next time, okay?
Yeah.
oh boy. So I just want to remind everyone of a couple of protocols. Please put yourself on mute when not speaking. If you are on Zoom or even on a phone, sometimes you have to use your mute button, but you have to use *6 to come back on and not be mute. And when you do want to speak, please state your name first for the record, and we'll go forward. So we go to item 3, and that's our consent items, and it is the approval of the minutes from the March 12th meeting. And Ms. Duquette, I have a couple of, I have a question and a couple of statements. So when it on the minutes says action minutes, call to order and roll call, can we insert Zach's name before Robinson, and also the same with Ken Todd? And then I believe Director Al White was not included in those present. So his name needs to be added. And then when we move to the second page, under 5C for presenters, we need to add White after Sean. And that's the very last name as TAC member.
I have all of those changes documented.
Pardon?
I have all of those changes documented.
Okay, anyone else have corrections to the minutes? Anyone else? You might be on mute. Hearing none, do we have a motion?
So moved. Move to approve minutes with corrections.
And that was
Zach,
Director.
I second.
Oh, that's White, Al White.
And the second, please? Whose name?
Zach Robinson, I second.
Okay, Zach, now I recognize your voice. All righty. So we have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes as corrected. Ms. Duquette, please do the roll call.
Director Brown? Chair Brown?
Yes.
Director Crane?
Present.
Director Robinson?
Yes.
Director Todd? Let me unmute him. Ken, you'll need to unmute your phone.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm here. Still
Director,
can't hear me?
yes.
Okay.
And Director White?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Going forward to item number 4, we have staff updates. Ms. Duquette?
Just a quick update. So the water agency has been working with Civic Spark, which is a part of AmeriCorps, to bring in an AmeriCorps fellow for 11 months to come work on the Groundwater Sustainability Plan project. We conducted our interviews and we're putting out offers now. So we're hoping that we will have a AmeriCorps fellow join our team in August or September. And we'll be working on the project with myself, Larry Walker, and as well as with the board and the TAC. So just wanted to give you that quick update.
Wonderful. Any questions, directors?
Is that a full-time role, and what would the person be doing? This is Zach again.
Yes, they'll be here 40 hours a week for the next 11 months, and their primary role will be supporting the Groundwater Sustainability Agency and the Water Agency with all aspects of the project. So they'll be helping us launch the economic analysis, the stakeholder outreach, the public forums, helping with these board meetings, as well as technical assistance with Larry Walker as we work on the different criterias and chapters.
Would that person be reporting to you, Sarah?
Yes.
Anyone else? Hearing no one, we'll move on to item number 5. And this is public comments on items not on the agenda. And at this time, because of our virtual meeting, I would like to ask Ms. Duquette, has there been any emails, phone calls, or letters received as a part of public comment?
No public comment has been received by email, letter, or phone call.
Okay. And we do have some others on the line, I believe, from the public that have joined us for the meeting. Does anyone have any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move forward to number 6 on our agenda, and these are the action items. And the first item is 6A, an update and discussion regarding the integrated model and groundwater sustainability plan development. And the board will receive an update on the progress in the GSP writing and the development of the integrated model. So, Ms. Duquette?
Hello. So today we have our team from Larry Walker and Associates here, and they have a presentation to review where we are with the model and the sustainability plan. They have a presentation, so they'll be sharing their screen, and that presentation is also included in the board packet that you received, and that's posted online.
Yep, thank you. So let me share the screen. Okay, I think you should see it now. Okay, and so because we didn't see each other for 3 months, so we tried to put together an update about all the different components we are working on, and we did quite a bit in terms of understanding better the system in the past 3 months, and we will be gathering. We are gathering more ideas. We had a good TAC meeting yesterday for basically getting some good homework for the summer. Let's put it that way, so that we will not be bored, I guess, with this project. And I'm really happy, Sarah, to hear that there is somebody that will help you out, because I can imagine that with more data collection, there will be more work that we will need to do, and a lot of coordination. So, oops, doesn't go. Okay, so this is a quick outline. First, I'll tell you where we are with the with the writing of this groundwater sustainability plan, because we always talk about the technical work, but in the background we keep writing, because sooner or later this document will need to be fully reviewed by you and vetted by the DAC, reviewed by everybody, and then it will have to go out for public comments. And so basically what we have done up to now, and that you have seen already, the integrated model is pretty much all up and running, and we presented some results yesterday about surface water and groundwater as simulated by the model, and this is in terms of more technical work. In terms of writing, the only chapter that we submitted to you up to now is chapter 2.1, which is a sort of introductory chapter. So now we are working on the next of chapter 2. And then we are working on developing sustainable management criteria, and we will review this very quickly. And also, if you remember when we met last time, even if it was kind of the day where basically all the mess started. So, but we worked a little bit on developing an idea for a sustainability goal that we can use in the plan, and we will give you a summary of that. So, in terms of the update of the model, you remember that we showed you this picture quite a few times, and this is just to remind you, and also this is also to tell you that now all these pieces are there, and we finally have a tool that we can use for running scenarios and making predictions. So we developed a watershed model that is representing rainfall and runoff, which is much larger than the Ukiah Valley groundwater basin, and we connect this model to the subsurface through what we call the stream flow routing package. And this stream flow routing is the one that is helping us represent all the streams in the valley. And now we are able to produce maps where we can show which parts of the streams, and with streams I mean both the main channel of the Russia River and all the tribes. We can see where these streams are losing water toward the groundwater, and where they are gaining water from the groundwater system. And then to close the budget, the water budget, we also have what we call an agricultural model. And that is basically using a crop information, land use, and to evaluate, and irrigation practices and whatever, to evaluate how much water it's needed by each of the crop that are cultivated in the valley. So now all the pieces are together. It's still under calibration, so we cannot say that these are the ones that we have are the final results, but the pieces are all there. And this is, if somebody wants to go more into the update, this is what I just told you using the sketch. So somebody has question on the model, or we can just keep going.
Does any of the directors have questions? I'm not hearing anyone come on.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. So it appears there are no questions by the directors. And do we have any public comment?
we still have a second portion of this agenda item for,
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought she said, should we get going? Okay.
I just wanted to.
did you already do the groundwater sustainability plan development portion of this?
No, I just split the two because I was thinking, being online sometimes is better to maybe stop to avoid losing people. I can keep going and then we open more format.
Okay, I'm sorry. You go forward. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a little bit left for 6A.
Okay, and then a quick update on the writing, because just to remember to each of you that the GSP has 5 main chapters. These 5 chapters have been pretty much defined by Department of Water Resources, and we are following their suggested annotated outline, so that then this would probably hopefully make things easier for them to review and also for us not to miss any components. And the introduction is something that probably we'll do at the very end, because it's more like work that the county, the agency will have, the water agency will have to do, with more administrative information on the GSA and some details on that. Most of the work we did up to now is on chapter 2, which is the plan area and the basin settings. But if you remember, last time we introduced the concept of sustainable management criteria. And then we have project and management actions, and this is where we will include all the ideas that will come out for just thinking about what to do for the next 20 years to demonstrate that the system is sustainable. So this is where we will come, we will use our understanding of the system to really suggest a solution if we need solution, or just suggest how to keep going if for some specific undesirable results there is actually no undesirable results. And then we have the plan implementation. And this is a chapter 2, which is what you received already for a preliminary review, chapter 2.1, which is a description of the plan area. Again, all the entities, whoever is involved in the Ukiah Valley groundwater basin should have a little paragraph there with some description. We still have a few gaps there, and we may still need to reach out to some of you, but it's mostly there. And then the chapter 2.2 is the basin settings. If you remember, our colleague from GEI, they already submitted the hydrogeological conceptual model, and that was fully done and developed, and that will be part of this chapter 2.2. And then we are presenting here all the information that we have about current and historical groundwater conditions, and also for that piece, this is probably information that once you see them, you will realize that we introduced them during our presentation, and now we are kind of combining everything. And then one of the key section of the basin setting is the water budget. And the water budget is what we are now finalizing with the model. So we will come and discuss more in details what we want to present in the chapter. And also it's also not done yet, because it has to include not only the water budget for current condition, but also the water budget for future projected conditions for climate. So that's what we are working on right now. And so beside chapter 2, we are also starting writing chapter 3. And I will present today. We introduced sustainable criteria last time in terms of concept. And this time, after having already discussed this topic with the TAC, we will present to you what we found out about groundwater quality in the basin. And we'll give you the direction that we got from the TAC in terms of how to include water quality in your GSP. And then see if somebody has comments about that. Okay, and this I think closes 6 point whatever. Yeah. I think Zach, question.
Yeah.
Yeah, does anyone have questions or would like to provide direction to staff and the contractor?
This is Zach Robinson. Laura,
Yes.
how are you going to share the actual text as you guys put it together? Are you going to do it in big chunks or everything all in or subchapter by subchapter?
I think we will try to avoid, as we told you at some point, a big, huge chunk. So maybe give you the key pieces step by step. So I think we may have this chapter 2 almost finished in a short time. And then you can start from that one. And then the way you will get the other pieces is not really by chapter, but by sustainable criteria. So we will start with water quality. You will get to review all the information for water quality. And then we move to the next one. And then, so in this way, you will review current condition and criteria and actions for each undesirable results. So, and they're coming together. They're basically are working parallel on chapter 2 and 3 right now.
You also shared, I think it was a month ago, maybe 2, a block of draft text. Did you get any feedback on that yet?
No, that's also why I wanted to repeat it today. Because that's exactly chapter 2.1, which is where it would be good to get a little bit more information from each single agency and the existing monitoring network. So we are still, and maybe Amir, you can jump in if you have specific details on what we are missing. But yeah, we still, that's why I was saying we will have to reach out again. We still have a few holes here and there.
Yeah, mine must have got lost in the mail.
We can resend it.
Yeah, I can send it again. So we have most of the things that we need for that subchapter 2.1. It's just mostly is introductory information. So we're gonna add a bunch of subsections about each water district that we have in the basin, some information about that, and then we have to add a bit of information about the monitoring programs that are already implemented within the basin by any agencies, and also any water management plan or any other plan that affects management of water in the basin. So these are the 2 big chunks that we need to coordinate with all the entities on the board and within the basin. First, what types of monitoring programs are going on in the basin, and a bit of details about them, and also the history of management of water or anything that has an effect or impact on water management in the basin. So these are the 2 portions that are practically missing from our subchapter 2.1.
Sir, please enter your name for the record.
Oh, sorry, this is Emil Mani from LBA.
Thank you. So anyone else? Directors? Well, I'm just going to say this year has been an interesting year, 3rd driest in 127 years. So it's very interesting how we go through these droughts. Then I wanted to add the Upper Russian River water managers had a meeting last week, and one of the requests for our meeting that would be held probably about the first week of August, they would like to have a presentation on our plan, development, and the models we're using, etc. So I believe Ms. Duquette, it would be you or one of the TAC members.
Yes, we can. We would be happy to provide the Upper Russian water managers an update, and we can work with the chair of the Technical Advisory Committee and Larry Walker and Associates to coordinate an update to that body.
Okay, appreciate it. Anyone else? Okay, so Ms. Duquette, we're going to move on to 6B. And 6B, oh, I forgot to ask for public comment. So we're back on 6A. Anyone from the public, would you like to comment?
Carrie, this is Devin from the Farm Bureau, and Zach sort of touched on my question, but Laura, it might be good when you follow up with everybody to also remind us about the specific form that you had requested that comments be submitted in. If I recall, there was a specific format that you wanted comments submitted. That would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Devon. Yeah, we were just thinking now that we are producing something more, just to use that as the opportunity to get back to everybody and give you some time to review. So yeah, we will put together all the information.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Please state your name for the record. Hearing no one, and glad I remembered, Devin. Thank you. Moving on to 6B. This is a presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the development of the sustainability goals for water quality, degradation, and subsidence. The board will receive the presentation regarding its development, and then also the technical advisory committee recommendations. I think we will hear from or hear about today. And the TAC meeting, that was yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Go forward, please.
Okay, so what we thought is, you have seen these things in March, but we thought that probably is good just to refresh everybody's mind. I will go quickly. Stop me if you think it needs to go more in detail. So what we are doing now, it's kind of really entering into the meat of this groundwater sustainability plan development. Decide on which are possible and desirable results that this plan wants to avoid, and how do we do that? So basically what the Department of Water Resources asks is to look at 6 sustainability indicators that are lowering groundwater levels, reduction of storage, seawater intrusion, degraded quality, land subsidence, and surface water depletion, and decide which are the metrics, which are the way for us to demonstrate that none of this is actually having a negative impact or is impacted negatively by the use of groundwater in the basin. So to do that, basically the department is really looking for numbers. So we have to come up with some kind of tangible, quantitative evaluation of these sustainable management criteria. And the sustainable management criteria are these threshold, triggers, and measurable objective that are in this plot as an example. And they need to be developed for each of the indicators. Obviously, you can imagine we can pretty much cross right away seawater intrusion. So for that one, we don't really need to do anything. And you will see, I will present it later today, also land subsidence, there is nothing, so we can do our due diligence, but we will go very quickly on that. And this basically leaves us with only 4, which is still a lot of work, but it's only 4. And so I just would like to remind you about how we define these threshold, triggers, and measurable objective. And I will do it thinking about the first indicators that we really want to go through, which is the degraded water quality. So we are really talking today about groundwater quality. I will present you what we presented to the TAC, and so we will just concentrate on our definition on basically these 4 indicators. And if you want to know why we started with water quality, you will see it's because it needs to be considered, and you will see that there are no serious problems, and the TAC was pretty much unanimous on how to decide to move forward. but at least it gives us a good way to learn how to move forward for the more complicated indicators. And this is just a draft examples. So imagine that this is your groundwater quality condition on this plot. And this is the 20 years of possible planning of the after we submit this plan for demonstrate this sustainability. What we need to show is that whatever management is happening into the basin is not degrading the groundwater quality of the basin. And the way we do it, we define undesirable results. So we decide what's the level above which we say that a constituent is too high, is impacting the quality of our groundwater, and we don't want to go there. We also have thresholds that usually for DWR are defined as minimum threshold. In this case, for water quality, it's a sort of maximum threshold. So, so it's the value above which you would not like to go. And I can give you a very simple example. We know that for drinking quality, nitrates should be below 10 milligram per liter. So we can decide that our threshold is a 10 milligram per liter. So we want to protect drinking water quality, for example. And this is to give you an idea. We also need to define what we call measurable objective, which is basically where ideally we would like to end up in 20 years from now. And so all these green bar in the bottom is where ideally we would like to see the value for certain constituents be floating in the next 20 years. I want to point out that because it's such a long-term planning, there is some, let's say, room for adjustment over the years. So if something happens after year 5, there is a new milestone and things can be slightly changed. The plan can change and adapt if you see that something is not really working in the direction that you want. And there is another thing, if let's imagine that 1 year something happens, or who knows, and then for a year or two your values go into this red area. That's not a red flag, as long as you can show that those points, those years where you go into the red flag, they are kind of corrected and things are coming down again. So there is quite a bit of flexibility. And so this is basically threshold and measurable objective. They need to be numbers at the end of the day. So as I told you, and we will give you some ideas about number for thresholds, and for water quality, it's not so complicated because there are other regulations that are already telling us which are the requirements, for example, for drinking water quality. And then the measurable objective is something that the TAC provided suggestion for, and then the board can decide in which direction to go. And there is obviously a sustainability goal for water quality, which is something that we also discussed last time. And when I provide you with a summary of the sustainability goal discussion, you will see that, for example, maintaining water quality, drinking water quality in the basin. And if you remember, basically, the way our process goes is that if we think about those bars that I showed earlier, like a thermometer, we need to understand what's healthy for the basin and what's unhealthy for the basin. So the first question is, which of the undesirable results, the 6 that I showed earlier, are really controversial? And what the thermometer looks like anyway for all the 6 undesirable results besides seawater intrusion. We as a technical team, we will summarize the existing data. We will come to you with options, and we will try as much as possible to provide you with a straw man suggestion on things that can be done. But then obviously they need to be vetted and approved by you. And then the technical advisory committee we'll propose some SMC for each undesirable results that then will be discussed with you. And what we will do today is discuss the proposed SMC for water quality that we kind of finalized in March. So the summary of, Sarah, should I stop or I keep going? I know that it's the same item. I just don't know if it's better to.
Let me just ask if there's any questions. And I missed just the first part because I ran to find my glasses so I can read my agenda. But anyway, anyone questions? Anyone from the public, questions? Hearing none, please go forward. And which slide are you on?
Let me see the number. 18.
Thank you.
Welcome. It might be slightly different because I may have added one slide this morning, Carrie. So might be 17. So we start now with the discussion of the summary of the survey on sustainability goal that we did last time. And we did this survey with both the TAC and the board. And then we try to collect all the inputs that we got and summarize them in a way that it's not really, hopefully not overwhelming. And I want to remind you that this is kind of the beginning. This is not, it's not that we are writing the sustainability goal today, and this is not gonna change for the next year and a half. It's really it's something that will kind of keep moving with us. We can refine the sustainability goal while we learn more about the system. So this is just the first review. And these are the things that we discussed last time. So we can think about a sort of a general vision. So what does sustainable groundwater management look like in Ukiah Valley groundwater basin? Then the second question was more like overarching goal. So if the groundwater is managed sustainably in the valley, what it has achieved. And then if you remember, we also discussed some possible worst case scenarios. And so what does the worst case scenario look like in the valley if groundwater is not managed sustainably? And these were the three main questions. And what we did is take all your answers and attack answers for this question and created this sort of overarching vision. So, and again, this might not be, we understand that some things can be overlapping between the different columns, but hopefully this is a good way for you to just see the main topics that everybody brought up. And if we look at the vision, for example, this is what we could summarize, that it looks like there is a need for adequate water for all needs, maintain high quality water, balance use and stabilize water levels, plan for water security, water conservation, support groundwater dependent ecosystem, no stream flow, surface water depletion, and no negative changes from existing variability. When we go into the overarching goal, we saw quite a few times this kind of suggestion that it would be good to avoid government interventions, so keep the local on top of this GSP development and the future implementation. So also stakeholder satisfaction, water availability, riparian biodiversity, improves stakeholders relations. Again, maintain high water quality seems to be something that keeps returning. And also the long-term water security. So create some kind of plan that will help you whatever happens in the basin in the next 20 plus years. The worst case scenarios, meter pumpings and fees. And I think this has been heard from a few people. Limits on water use, endanger and degrade sources, poor relations among stakeholders, threats for groundwater depletion and groundwater dependent ecosystems, following of ag lands, desert landscape, economic decline, and environmental degradation. So again, we can also provide the more detailed answers, but I think this is a good way to have everything just in one place, and each of you can think more about eventually which are really the big serious priorities. And moving from this one, we also decided to just give it a try with a first definition of what looks like a sustainability goal. And again, this is our straw man suggestion. We'll keep working on this. And what we came up with is something like the primary sustainability goal of this GSP is to manage the groundwater basin locally to ensure the short-term and long-term supply of safe and high-quality water for the beneficial uses and users of the basin through coordination and collaboration among stakeholders, maintaining or improving groundwater levels in the basin, maintaining appropriate flows in surface water bodies for GDEs, and improving riparian biodiversity by managing surface water depletion, building local resiliency to climate change, long-term droughts and infrastructural changes, and providing proper management action and operational flexibility to achieve long-term sustainability. And again, you can read through it, see what you like, what you don't like. It's just a first cut, and we have to keep working. And again, the sustainability goal, it's different from the sustainable management criteria because it's just a qualitative, is a vision. It doesn't need numbers. It's just a description of what you would like to achieve. The numbers come when we start with the sustainable management criteria. And if somebody has comments?
Yes. Anyone, questions or comments? Okay.
Looks good. Okay.
We're on to sustainable management criteria.
Yeah, and we are now on the way. We will present you quickly what we analyzed for water quality and the idea of tax suggestions. And if it's okay for everybody, we will use those suggestions to finalize what we are writing in the GSP for water quality. So for water quality, first I want to point out a couple of things that I believe are very important. And we need to be clear on what's the role of the GSA in terms of water quality, because we briefly discussed that last time, but there are other agencies and other institutions already in charge for water quality. So this has to be very clear. So the existing regulatory agencies and programs for water quality are, for example, state and regional boards, Department of Toxic Substances Control, Department of Pesticide. So the GSA is not going to supersede any of the existing bodies working on water quality. What we can see as the role for the GSA is that the GSA will really be the main steward of groundwater basin sustainability for groundwater quality in this specific sustainable criteria. And the idea is that, what does this mean? That in our monitoring network, we will have to include what we think is going to demonstrate that the basin is sustainable. If something happens, like a big spill of from a gas station or whatever, I'm just saying as an example, it's not the GSA duty to come in and clean up, for example. That's still something, the GSA might be the one noticing that something is happening, because maybe during the regular monitoring program, there will be something that will jump to our eyes, to your eyes, and but then the role of the GSA is going to be call the regional board and say, there is a cleanup to do. So this is very important to remember, that it's big cleanups and this kind of intervention. It's not the role of the GSA, and it's not, doesn't have to be in the budget and in the future actions of the GSA. So the GSA, honestly, it mostly has monitoring duties for groundwater quality. It doesn't really have much more intervention. And if, as I said, if there is a man-made pollution, like a spill from a gas station, for example, the GSA may act as a proactive facilitator to move forward on processes to clean up the groundwater, but that's really the role. It's not gonna be the main the main entity responsible for the cleanup.
May I interrupt just 1 minute?
Sure.
Usually that's the duty of the Regional Water Quality Control Board, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically the role of the GSA will be mostly pick up the phone and call them. That's
exactly
the way. So just say, because the GSA will anyway need to demonstrate that there is a continuous monitoring for the next 20 years. And I will tell you more about that for water quality. But again, if something happens, it's gonna be more, the GSA role will be to mobilize other people, other entities that are responsible. And obviously we have to be, for water quality, imagine that while we work on this process, we may come up with some kind of new projects, like maybe groundwater recharge or some different pumping or whatever. We need to be, the GSA need to consider, we need to be clear on monitoring whatever action we suggest, so that then we can eventually adjust if something doesn't work. So, and I can give you an example. Obviously, if we want to decide, for example, on a groundwater recharge basin, and we know that there is an area which is very high in boron, for example, maybe you don't really want to recharge that specific area because that might spread the boron around or may create trouble. So when we look into future projects, we need to keep an eye on water quality, but again, it's mostly from a monitoring perspective. So what we did in Ukiah, for water quality, we pulled all the data that are already available in what it's called GAMA database, which is the Groundwater Ambient Monitoring and Assessment Program. And we learned that in principle, all the water quality data should go into this database. Actually, the CWIX data, so the Integrated Water Quality System, are still separated. And it turns out that still there might be something missing. It looks like for Ukiah, we were fine. What we found out is that there are 629 wells that historically have been monitored for water quality in the valley. And 384 of these have data starting from 1990 with a kind of a continuous long, not necessarily long data set, but at least more than just 1 point. And 207 unique analytes have been considered. And really the longest period is from November 1950. We went to end of 2019 when we did this work. But basically, what we decided is that the really representative period is from 1990, because for the period 1950-1990, we may have just 1 point per well here and there, so it doesn't really help us make any story. And the first thing we need to do for the GSP is look at all the water quality data available, and then come up with a list of which are possible constituents that the GSA might be interested in monitoring. And for the Ukiah Valley, what we end up with was boron, higher iron, manganese, nitrate, and specific conductance. And we understand that boron, iron, and manganese are naturally occurring constituents, so it's not that you are required to clean up for those, but might be good to know where they happen. Again, thinking about what I said earlier, if we want to design new projects, we might want to be careful of the actual condition of the groundwater in the area. And then nitrate, it seems to be, it was kind of fully approved by the TAC. And then the TAC suggested that also specific conductance is a good constituent because it's a good indicator of in case something can happen. So if we imagine that this is the short list of chemicals of concern, if we put this in the plan, basically these are the ones for which the GSA needs to keep monitoring. There is already a lot of monitoring ongoing, so it's not that the GSA needs to start from scratch, but there would be the need to report at least on this. So if we look at boron, and these are there are 32 wells where we got data for boron for the period from 1990. In this map, we just show the maximum value measured in a specific well over those 30 years. So then it sometimes might be just 1 point that went way over, but it's to give you an idea. And so most of the boron seems to be on the eastern side. When we plot it over time, this is how it looks like. So it's pretty consistent, nothing is changing. And because again, it's a naturally occurring constituent. So you just don't want to see if something happens and it goes really high, we may want to consider if it's because of some of the actions that we are doing, but otherwise all the wells show a pretty consistent linear flat trend. And the detection, the limit is 1, so we are over, but basically it's not that the requirement is to clean it up for having less than 1. And then when we look at iron, we have more wells over the 30-year period that seems to go over the SMCL, so the limit. And here is how it looks like. But again, there is no general really increasing trend. So the suggestion was we just need to probably monitor it because it might be interesting. And it's something that can tell you if it can tell, like boron can tell us if something happens, but it's not of a serious concern in the valley. And then we went to manganese, and it's pretty much the same story. You see that it looks like there was this well in green going a little higher, but might be that then next year is again coming down. For the last, unfortunately for manganese, we basically have data only from 2005, actually 2008, but they are pretty much following a flat line. When we go and we look into nitrogen as N, so and the MCL, here is basically we don't see any exceedance. I think there was one single exceedance here, which is where there is the treatment plan. But again, remember that this map just shows the highest value over a 30-year period. So sometimes you may just have 1 point that goes over. And this is how it looks like, because at the end, it looked like probably that single point that went over the 10 milligram per liter was earlier in the days. So if we look at nitrate from 1990 onward, you see that this is a 10 milligram per liter, which is the MCL required by the Regional Water Board to define that we are maintaining drinking water quality. And none of the wells that we have seems to really show any significant problem or increased trend or whatever. And again, I'm not showing you all the data. This is kind of a samples of the data, but it's kind of representative of how things look like. And finally, we have specific conductivity, pretty much the same story. The difference for a specific conductivity is that there are different limits in the Basin plan for the Russian River Valley and in the regular plan. So we can look at a different type of MCLs, but in any case, there are no data that really show any significant exceedance. And then I want just to give you some more ideas of how to look at the data that we just saw. So we can, for example, decide if we take this specific conductivity, for example, and we can probably decide where we want to put our maximum threshold, which can be one of the SMCL defined in the Basin plan. And that's probably, it's like if we go even easier, if we go to nitrate, we can decide that the measurable, the threshold is 10 if we want to maintain drinking water quality. And then basically, if that's our threshold, we can decide either to define the threshold and the minimum and the measurable objective at the same value. So both of them at 10, because again, being water quality and having existing limits, that makes things a little easier. Or we can also decide to have the measurable objective a little lower and then define some what we call triggers. So just to have the GSA, let's say that one well has show an increase in nitrate over 5 years, maybe you can decide, oh, if I have such an increase in nitrate, I would like to have triggers that tell me, look at it a little better because maybe something is happening in that specific area. And the way you do that is, if you imagine that this is how it works out, so we decided this, and again, we use nitrate as an example because it's easy to understand. So imagine that 10 is the threshold because we want to maintain water quality, drinking water quality. We decide maybe to put the measurable objective down at 8, and this is just an idea. And then some triggers in the middle, and the triggers can be of different type, can just take an average, can use some trends of the existing data. I believe in the Basin like Ukiah, where there are no real issues right now with water quality, probably would make sense to just put a triggers that uses a trend. So if there is an upward trend for some reason for more than 3 or 4 years, we can decide that the GSA can take an action. And these are this is for example another suggestion of what we can do. We can even decide use the downward trend, for example, as a measurable objective. And so it's pretty easy in terms of water quality. These are a concept that we want to keep repeating, because once we get to other criteria, it will not be as easy because we don't have existing like 10 milligram per liter or whatsoever. And then we come to what we, looking at this results, what we got from the TAC as suggestion for moving forward. Remember, so what we need to define is if we agree with that list of constituents that I showed at the very beginning, those 5 that we had in the table, some ideas of how we want to fix threshold and objectives, and also talk about the monitoring network. If we want to keep using the existing monitoring network that we think it's extended enough, or if there is a desire for expanding the monitoring network. So the suggestion for the tax says that, okay, there is no significant water quality issue in the basin that really need to be addressed right now. So the goal of the plan and of the GSA is mostly to demonstrate that there will be no degradation over the next 20 years. They approved the proposed list of constituents, so the 5 that I showed you at the very beginning, and they said that those are sufficient for understanding that the water quality is maintained in the basin. They suggested to set maximum threshold, and triggers that are pretty much equal to the drinking limit, the MCL or the SMCL. So whatever is already in the plan in terms of limits, use those to define our sustainable criteria. It looks like the existing monitoring network, which is already, a lot of water quality data are collected by all the water district, by the water treatment plant. And so the existing monitoring network, it's enough. So it should be used in a plan for keeping going with demonstrating water quality. And the final overarching objective for water quality is to maintain the current status and considered as high water quality within the basin. And I think, I don't know, Sarah, I think this is how we summarized our discussion from the TAC in March.
Yes, and so we're hoping to get feedback from the board and kind of an acceptance of the recommendations from the TAC to incorporate into the plan development.
So directors, any statements, questions on the development of the sustainability goals, and then any the TAC recommendations for water quality, degradation, and subsidence? Do you have comments? What do you think?
I'll make a comment. This is Al White. I thought option A seemed a little more approachable. The 5-year trend seemed like a good point to work with, so that short-term things don't keep triggering stuff. And in terms of triggers, I really think that those triggers were set by other agencies doing some research, I would hope. I don't really feel competent to put triggers in that would be different than those MCLs, SMCLs, and NLs. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Director White. Other directors?
This is Zach Robinson here. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the idea of going out and monitoring naturally occurring minerals in the water. I know that one of my wells that's in the monitoring network is giving you the high manganese numbers. Those manganese numbers are well in excess of any kind of MCL that would be out there. I mean, my first thought is MCLs are based on a 30-year exposure in a drinking water scenario. We love that water for ag use. I don't think we would use it for drinking. That's weird that we would choose to monitor that and use these triggers or potentially thresholds for a use of the water that it was never appropriate for. The other thing too that I'm just trying to wrap my head around is, particularly with iron and boron, it's always been buyer beware. Certain areas in our basin are known to have high iron or high boron. If we put 2 more monitoring wells in those areas, we'd suddenly find ourselves in violation of our own rules. But it's always been that way. It's naturally occurring. So anyway, I'm also thinking here about this issue of essentially it's sample bias. Where do we monitor? And if somebody wanted to pop a new hole in the ground and say that we have a boron problem, it wouldn't be too hard to figure out where to pop that hole in the ground.
Yeah, no, and this all makes sense, Zach. That's also what, for example, for manganese, one of the reasons we left it there, because I remember also Glenn saying, high manganese water is good for our ag practices. And basically the idea of using the MCL is mostly for nitrate, for example. So you don't want to set new numbers. For the naturally occurring constituents, we will use a different approach. We will just say where we know that they are happening, and that's natural, and that's a different type of water use. But it's important to have them in the plan, because let's imagine that, as you said, somebody wants to poke a new hole and start pumping, and they exactly decide to do that in an area that you already know that is very rich in boron. You don't want to do that if you want to drink that water, right? So it's more like to show that there is an understanding of what's naturally occurring in the basin and keeping monitoring, because the other thing is if you design a project that it's making, for example, things worse for some reason, you want to know that. And basically what the TAC suggested anyway is that the amount of water quality data that are collected in the valley by the different water districts and the city, everybody, looks like it's enough to really keep demonstrating over the next 20 years. So that was the direction. But I think I really appreciate your comment, for example, about manganese, because I believe we need to make it clear that we want what we want to protect and where. So, but for manganese, iron, and boron, obviously, we will not be suggesting to use drinking limits as thresholds, because it will never get there. It's not possible.
So why would we spend money to continue to monitor these constituents in the areas where we know they're naturally present?
Oh, we will not. That's exactly the point. You will not spend any money on water quality monitoring, because these things are already continuously monitored by other agencies. So the final suggestion from the TAC, exactly in the same direction as you are suggesting, is we have and we don't need to spend more money on water quality monitoring. So basically what will happen once, after we submit the plan, we will highlight a few wells in each of the water district and the city and whatever, and use those to report the data every year, but there will be no extra monitoring done by the GSA. So no extra cost.
Director Robinson?
I think that was Al. I recognize Al's there.
Yes, that was my, this is Al White. From what Zach is saying, I agree with him, but I think we need to keep in mind that we can prevent that from becoming an issue by making sure to emphasize in our vision, the summary of sustainability goal survey, the vision, the no negative changes from existing variability, that there are things out there that individual wells or whatever that exist, and that there's a high degree of variability. And as long as those things aren't making some kind of radical change, we're fine with that once we've established that we don't have a problem. So in my mind, we are first establishing we don't have a problem, and we're looking for seeing no changes from our existing variability, which is not a problem. So I don't know if that answers Zach's concern or not.
Yeah, and in a sense, that's all why I was suggesting that maybe we keep monitoring and we put like a sort of a trigger of, let's say that somewhere things keep going badly, I don't know, for 5 years. Maybe at that point you would start arguing, thinking, something maybe is happening. And but obviously it's not just one single point that would trigger any action, because we understand that things also for some of things can go up and down a little bit. I mean, honestly, nitrate, all the data that we look at, they seem pretty kind of, if something happens, it's really because, I don't know, you start spilling something big for real. But for the naturally occurring, again, we don't have to be worried about spikes. We see that they go up and down. So we just keep an eye, and we don't want to make them go increasingly high, because then that would demonstrate a sort of degradation of the quality that's not happening right now. So I doubt that can happen, because again, we'll be careful on saying where everything happens and how we design the network. But again, we will build on existing networks. So there will be that. This is not a piece that will have an extra cost for the GSA.
Question.
Sorry?
Question.
Sure.
If we know that all the water is not the same, the point that was made about if a well goes in and monitors a condition that is unfavorable for drinking water, but may be fine for ag water, it seems that the document should acknowledge that there are differences in the water that make them suitable for different uses.
Mm-hmm.
And not to allow it all to be swept into, treated as an average of the findings from the various wells, but segregate them in terms of use, pay attention to how they're used to conform to the quality necessary for that particular use. Does that solve in any way the concern you had, Zach?
Yeah. I mean, as I think about this, and like I say, I don't know if I have a concern yet. I'm just kind of wrapping my head around it. It would take a lot of language to kind of clarify that there's like 6 issues here that have been mentioned. Variability, absolutely. We have different water quality objectives for different uses, and that makes perfect sense to me, at least. Presumably, we might even have different triggers based on the use. Again, MCL is being used for ag water. That's kind of weird. And then Laura, you were talking about, and Al was talking about this too, just adding language that explicitly identifies, we know we have areas, not just with variability, but areas with higher concentrations of these natural constituents.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I wrap my concern into one sentence or two, it'd be, let's not use the same concept that we would use with something like nitrites, which would be a tremendous concern with other things that would be in the naturally occurring list.
Yeah, and probably I should have been even more clear. The suggestion was to use MCL for nitrate and specific conductants, because that can have a direct impact, for example, for drinking water wells or similar. But then when it comes to naturally occurring constituents, we will not be using those because those are there. And then at that point, I think it will be good to bring in the knowledge about that water being used for different purposes. So there is no concern. So even if it's high in manganese, you are using it for irrigation, and that's a good, and that works. So there will be it's not a one rule that fit all of them. But I think the main message is that it doesn't look like there is need for any serious action, because there are no serious real water quality problem in the basin.
Laura, if we looked at the graph, here, let me just choose one. Sure, page 28, it's the boron graph.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's what, I don't want people to look at that and think, oh boy, they got a water quality problem up in the Ukiah Basin. Look at that 1 microgram threshold, and then look at all the sampling they're getting out of their wells.
Yeah.
That could really be misinterpreted in a very bad way.
Yeah, but that's going to be our role, Zach, at explaining that if you see this map, all the high boron is in one location.
Yeah.
So we can really use that to explain. We know that it's just because geologically is happening there. And there are other GSPs that consider naturally existing constituents. So it's not, yours is not the first one. And
oh, come on, we're special.
You are, but you are for sure for many things. No, but we can just adapt the language so that we can put everything in the right context. So I still believe it's good, and we can decide we don't even want to present these naturally existing constituents. That might, if you feel like that's a better approach, or maybe my approach would be, let's see how it looks like when we wrap it up and try to put each single piece in context with and see if you agree with the directions. At the end of the day, the TAC seemed to be okay about presenting this naturally occurring. With this perspective, obviously, we don't need to clean up for manganese, boron, or iron, that's for sure. But some of these constituents are important, for example, for agriculture, or boron might be interesting to know. It's good to know where it's happening. So if somebody takes your plan in 30 years from now, they will know where boron is also. And so it's totally true, Zach. Everything needs to be put in the right context and well and properly explained in the plan.
Laura, just a point of clarification. So if you see, Zach, there are 32 wells that are monitored for boron. So the graph that we showed, we didn't want to put too many slides here. So that graph just has 8 wells in it. And we can't show like 32 on the graph. So practically we're kind of showing your worst wells in that
Well,
graph.
exactly.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, so it's not all the wells. That's just probably most of the wells that you see right in that east corner of the basin. One other thing that I wanted to add about the discussion of the water quality is what I've seen, what we've seen in other plans that have been submitted. None of them are based on 1 or 2 wells. If they go higher in concentration for water quality, there's always geographical inputs and also statistical inputs, like a portion of the wells should go bad, or a third of the area should go bad. So these are the things that makes GSA respond. Or the one thing that all of them kind of mention is that the degradation should happen because of the management of the GSA, so that the GSA is responsible then for cleaning it up. So it's just these kind of languages that we will add to the plan, and it's going to be reviewed, that gets things in order in terms of looking at these data. In the end, if it's really important, one suggestion in the SIGMA itself is to define management areas. You can actually define. We don't think for water quality that might be the best use because you don't have a problem. But if you want, you can actually separate out the basin into different areas and say you're gonna put different SMCs for each area. But there is no serious problem in water quality, honestly. So that wasn't our initial recommendation.
Anyone else?
Thank
And
you.
previous to Director Robinson, I believe it was Director Crane that was speaking. So anyone else?
Carrie, are you going to call for public comment?
I am right now.
And quickly, Carrie, after water quality, we do have subsidence as well.
I know. I see we do. So, but Devin, do you have, please state your name for the record. Is this on degradation part of it, or the water quality degradation that the TAC recommendations or any of the charts we've seen?
Correct. So this is Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. Just a couple of questions. And Zach covered some of my first question, but regarding boron, one conversation that we've had quite a bit within the agricultural community has always come back to, do water quality indicators potentially indicate areas within this valley that have independent true groundwater versus hydrologically connected groundwater to surface water? Are we going to be able to utilize some of these potential areas that we know have different content from surface water component to potentially differentiate between what could be potentially hydraulically connected versus non-hydraulically connected groundwater?
That's a really good point, Devon. Yeah, that's something that we can think more about. Because in principle, yes, if we can delineate, the problem is that we may not have enough information on how to fully delineate the area of the boron, but maybe we can, and try to use that, because in those areas probably you don't really have a component coming from surface water, I imagine. So we can think about it. That's a good suggestion, actually.
And then a secondary question to that, I guess as a follow-up is, I know for sure we've got boron on both the east and the west side. So it's more common in certain areas of this valley that are indicated within the current wells that we have. So yeah. And then one last question is, in terms of water quality, a lot of times when we discuss water quality, temperature also plays a role, not just content. Is temperature monitoring going to be any sort of indication as part of this process?
Yes, we kind of decided that temperature seems to play a bigger role when we start talking about surface water groundwater interactions. So we did, so it's not really required to be discussed as one of the water quality per se, but the instruments that we are planning to install in the valley would be for both groundwater elevation and temperature, because temperature is a great tracer. So we want to take advantage of that. So we are considering temperature. We don't really have data that we can use about that at the moment, but in what we will be installing in these transects across the Russian River, we have temperature. So basically we'll be able to see the signal of temperature moving away from the river in the groundwater.
Yeah, because again, just asking that, because, you know, talking to some of our agricultural members who've done water quality sampling for their agricultural wells, you know, both content of mineral content and temperature analysis has been something that they've used to compare to surface waters to show, you know, potential areas of non-connectivity. So they could play a part in that conversation as well.
Yeah, no, actually, temperature will be really exactly used for that topic. So that's the reason why it doesn't need to be necessarily in the water quality side, but will come pretty heavily in the surface water groundwater interactions.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Not hearing anyone come forward. We can move on to the sustainable management criteria for subsidence, please.
Yes, and this one will be very quick, so no worries. We might end up being just 5 minutes late. So we did our, let's call it due diligence for looking at subsidence in the valley, and just demonstrating and collecting the data that we have. The way that the data that we have available for Mendocino County for subsidence are generously offered by Department of Water Resources, basically. So Department of Water Resources started in 2015 to collect subsidence data via satellite images for all the basins in the state. And so that's pretty much what's available. You know, in other areas where there are significant problems of subsidence, the local agencies are installing separate type of data collection, but in Mendocino County, we don't really see the reason for that. So this is just to give you an idea of the maps of the entire state. The area in red is where you really see a significant impact of subsidence. So subsidence is an undesirable result. DWR basically is analyzing and providing these data for all the basins every year. So that's what we are monitoring. Now we started, and now we are still waiting for the latest data. So our data is expected by April 2020. There was a typo. And in the basin prioritization, Ukiah Valley got 0 point for subsidence, which means already DWR was acknowledging that there is no subsidence. So if you remember how it worked, these are kind of points that got assigned to the basin, and that's the reason why you ended up in a medium category, but not for subsidence. So what we did is we look at the data in the valley for the period 2015-2018, which is what we have right now. And basically what in a plot on the right, which is the light blue one, eventually you see that there is some darker blue here. Darker blue would be meaning that there is some kind of subsidence. But then when we really go look at the size of this possible displacement, we are within the error of the instrument. So there is really nothing that is showing any possible subsidence happening right now. So our suggestion, and the TAC pretty much approved it, is that there is no other undesirable results and there is no need to address significantly subsidence in the basin. What we will write into the plan is that the agency will keep checking the data that DWR will be providing annually for subsidence and just monitor and demonstrate that there is no effect happening in the next 20 years. And I think that's it. So this was pretty easy and quick. I don't know if somebody has comments or would like to see something different.
Yes. Any questions, comments, directors? Hearing none. Public comment or questions? Hearing none. I would just like to ask, it's not on our basin, but the first round for highly critical rated basins, those GSPs have gone in. Have we heard anything about their evaluation from DWR or?
Not yet. We keep ourselves up to date, Carrie, so we will find out. The only thing we learned based mostly on comments received by those GSPs, because the GSPs went on end of January, and then DWR opened a open comment period, and public comment period, sorry, and we are learning something from the comments that they are getting. But it's not yet any decision from DWR. From what we've seen, a lot of the comments have been really related to stakeholder engagement, and so we need to be really sure that we are doing everything properly to involve everybody. I hope that so now that we are starting the new grant, we really need to work seriously on the public meeting, for example. And then a lot of other comments were about impact on groundwater dependent ecosystems. So we will have to do that in a proper way as well. But these, again, are only public comments, not yet comments from Department of Water Resources.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Anyone? Questions? Comments? I want to thank you very much. Always excellent presentation that we receive from you as the consultant, so appreciate it greatly. We're going to be moving on. Mr. Kett, right?
Yes.
Okay. To item number C, and this is discussion and possible adoption of the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. We need to discuss it, come back with any recommendations, questions, etc. And we did approve an increase in the dues, or the dues due by July of 2020. And I think that was, wasn't it $3,000 a piece, Mr. Kett?
Yes, approval to invoice in July $3,000 to fund the agency for the next 2 fiscal years. So when we created the budget in your packet, you have your actuals for 2018 and 19, the projected year end for this current fiscal year 2019-20, and we will have a fund balance of 1,914 moving into next fiscal year. And then we included the dues amount, which is 12,000, and we plugged in numbers for the administration, and then just some minor numbers for services and supplies, for mail, public noticing, office expenses for like meetings and things like that. It's a pretty standard budget. We kind of been averaging, anywhere from like $6,000 to, I would say, like $7,000 per year with the basic administration of the agency. And so that's what's before you today is $7,000 for administrative services, which it could come in lower just based on actuals from 2018-19, and then $250,000 set aside for just like incidentals for travel, office expenses, or communications.
Okay, this is Chair Brown again. The grant funding, could we at our next meeting maybe talk a little bit about that so we're kept up to date?
Yeah, we definitely can. We just signed an agreement with DWR maybe second week of May for Proposition 68. And we've been pushing pretty much all costs that we can over to the grant dollars and really using this just for like the basic administration functions of the meeting bodies.
Okay, again, this is Chair Brown. Directors, questions, comments? Hearing none, we do need to consider adoption of our 2020-2021 budget. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move. Douglas Crane.
And do we have a second?
I'll second it. This is Al White.
Okay. We have a motion and second. Oh my gosh, I should ask for public comment. Any public comment? Hearing none. We do have a motion and a second on the floor for approval. Ms. Duquette, please conduct the roll call.
Director Brown? Chair Brown?
Yes.
Director Crane? Doug? Director Crane?
Aye.
Director Robinson?
Abstain.
Director Todd? Director Todd, you're muted.
Can he put his thumbs up? Is he on Zoom?
He is. Let me see if I can unmute him.
*6.
Aye. Hear me now?
Yes. Is that an aye?
Yes, aye.
And Director White?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Duquette. And directors' reports. Does anyone have a report they would like to give? Hearing none, this is Chair Brown, Director Brown. Again, I just want to state this is our third driest year in 127 years. Think back to 76, 77, 13, 14, and now here we go again. And I have mentioned this at the Board of Supervisors meeting because we may need to look at forming again a countywide drought task force. Another crisis. County's already planning for PSPS and possible wildfires this season. So, you know, if anyone can bring information to me about conditions or concerns, I'd sure like to hear them. And I will say that temporary change petitions have been filed on the releases to lower them from both Lake Mendocino and Lake Pillsbury. Then I would like to tell everyone that IWPC, Inland Water and Power Commission, will be meeting tonight. Meeting begins at 6, but it will be a closed session. Do not know how long that will take. And then we will be going into open session for our meeting and updates. But our last IWPC meeting, anyone that's interested in learning more about where we are on the Potter Valley project, the minutes of the last meeting, which are up for approval tonight, give a lot of detail that you might want to read. And then, Mr. Kett, on the tribal representative, is Director Brown still engaged? Do we need to do something or write a letter to the tribes indicating, her participation?
She did register for this Zoom meeting, so I'm assuming that there must have been something that came up last minute. But
Okay.
Follow up with Director Brown. Also, before the COVID-19 happened, we were starting the discussions with the tribal entity of how to refine their appointment process to increase participation and hopefully have kind of that sorted before start of the 2021 calendar year when all of the seats will be up for reappointment. So we're hoping to have something to the board about that later this year. And hopefully we'll be able to re-engage on some of our stakeholder outreach now that things are starting to normalize and reopening is occurring.
Okay. Thank you very much for that update. Anyone else? Hearing no one, I will adjourn this meeting, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you all.